Hey everyone, still working on Festival Quickies and the Lion King review, but here's some other movies I watched. One of them is the new Jim Cummings film, The Wolf of Snow Hollow. No, not the voice actor Jim Cummings, this is the Jim Cummings that directed Thunder Road, which is a great movie that you should all see. Now, just like Thunder Road, he wrote, directed, and starred in the film, but this film is actually his first studio project, so he's working with much more recognizable actors here. There's Riki Lindhome from Knives Out and Under the Silver Lake, there's Academy Award-nominated Robert Forster, and there's Jimmy Tatro, who played one of the best characters in American Vandal. There's good acting throughout the film, and the characters are fun and watchable, but once again, the most entertaining character is Jim Cummings in the lead role. There are many similarities between the character he played in this film and in Thunder Road, and it's clear that he's really working towards his strengths. There's a fun level of sad awkwardness in the characters that he plays, and it makes for a really entertaining watch. The film is well shot for the most part, and there's a good sense of tone and atmosphere. This movie isn't so much about the werewolf as it is about the town and its characters. And despite this being a studio project, it is still fairly low budget. There are parts of this film that are cheesy and tropey, but it's not a film that takes itself super seriously. As the film goes on, it's pretty clear that it's more of a comedy than anything else. There are horror mystery elements and there are dramatic elements, but the comedy is what really shines in this film. As the energy builds throughout the film, it becomes kind of a stressful, dark comedy in a way. I don't think I've ever seen a werewolf movie with this exact tone before at all. It does take some time for the tone of this film to be explicitly clear. The beginning of this film feels like it's played a lot more straightforward than what we get by the end of it, but if you keep watching the film and allow it to build upon itself as it progresses, it becomes a very unique experience. There are lots of genuinely funny moments in this film, and it gets better and better as it goes along. Now, compared to Thunder Road, this film isn't nearly as deep when it comes to its characters and emotions, and that's not to say that there's no depth to the characters in this film, but much like the tone in this film, the characters wind up being more properly and thoroughly explored in the second half. The shots of the werewolf in this film can sometimes feel a little bit inconsistent. There are some shots where it doesn't look super convincing, and other shots where it looks great. There are also some narrative decisions in the film that I could imagine annoying some people. I personally wasn't upset with where the story went and found that it made the film more unique, but there were some aspects to it that did seem a little bit confusing in terms of how it was presented. Still, this was a really enjoyable and hilarious movie that has a great buildup of tone and emotions as it goes on. There's some great sequences and some clever dialogue. The music was also serviceable for what it was. This film is certainly no masterpiece, and it's not as great as Thunder Road in my opinion, but it is definitely entertaining and well worth checking out. It's available on digital right now, so yeah, go watch it. If you're interested in seeing the interview I did with Jim Cummings at Sundance this year, you can watch that too. And I'm giving this one a 7 out of 10. Another film I saw was the new Antonio Campos film, The Devil All the Time. Now, I've thoroughly enjoyed a few of Antonio Campos's films. Simon Killer is a film that I consider to be pretty underrated. This newest film is his biggest and most professional project to date. It's got a pretty great cast, including Tom Holland and Robert Pattinson. My favorite performance was probably from Riley Keough, but everybody did a really great job. There were a couple tiny moments with Robert Pattinson's performance where his accent seemed a little bit off, but it obviously didn't ruin the movie, and it was easy to forgive considering other aspects to his performance that I really appreciated. I love that he not only performed a character with an accent, but also talked in a higher register. There are lots of interesting ways that Robert Pattinson finds to differentiate the characters he's played throughout his career. Surprisingly, the main child performance was also pretty great. I was also never annoyed with how his character's dialogue was written. Far too often there are films that write child characters' dialogue without them really sounding like children. There were even some lines from this character that I really enjoyed. The film was really well shot overall and has fantastic music. The musical score for this film is probably my favorite aspect. This film is very bleak and depressing and violent, and the violence is also, for the most part, really well presented. Much of this film feels emotionally brutal, although I can understand if this film almost feels unnecessarily bleak. To me, the depressing aspects of this film still felt like they had a purpose in the overall narrative. My bigger issue with the story is that it does feel a little bit bloated in the first half. It's a film that takes a while to connect everything together so that everything you see feels justified. For much of this film, it almost feels as though there is no main character, but as it goes along, it ties itself up pretty nicely. In the second half of the film, it's much easier to understand the purpose of everything that was shown, and it's also a lot easier to focus in on the single character that this film is really about. I've also heard criticisms against the voiceover narration in this film, but it didn't really bother me at all. There are multiple points in the film where it gives us insight to what certain characters are thinking, and although sure, it's not technically impossible to communicate that information in other ways, it still felt justified for the narrative experience it was going for. for. There are quite a few people who really do not like this movie, and perhaps it just comes down to how your criticisms are weighted. Perhaps the aspects of this film that only bothered me slightly were ones that severely detracted from the experience of others. Still, I personally thought that this film overall was pretty great, so check this one out if you haven't seen it and let me know what you think. And I'm giving this one a 7 out of 10.